Hi, welcome to the inaugural episode of Snow Family Farm, Oklahoma. My wife's saying no. She's giggling. So this is going to be the first episode. Lower your expectations for about 3 seconds. We'll get into this. So my wife hasn't done a lot of broadcasting before in her career. She's taught for how many years?
23.
Come up close to the mic where they can hear you.
23.
23 years. What did you teach in those 23 years?
I taught third grade, junior high, coached high school girls sports, and assorted boys sports as well.
Well, and just so you know, we're recording this in the middle of a nice little thunderstorm. So, just like our studio is our kitchen table tonight, we've got 3 large, very frightened dogs from the thunder. 2 of them are over 120 pounds. Then the other is, what do they call him? A punt dog? He's just the right size to kick from 30 yards out. So, Snow Farms, who are we? What are we trying to do? Why are we making a podcast? So I started, let's go back to the beginning. And in the beginning, there's a void. No, not that far back. So 2008, I was coaching college basketball. I spent 4 years coaching women's basketball, 4 years coaching men. And I'd done everything they told me to do, right? I got my master's done. I didn't have any student loan debt. I had 20 suits, a Porsche 911, a Jeep Wrangler, Rubicon, and I didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. And the financial markets crashed, and the housing market in Idaho went from my house basically lost 40% of its value in about 3 months. So I grew up on a sustenance farm in north central Arkansas, and my dad was born in 1924, so I grew up hearing all the stories of the Depression and the want that folks had for 15 years during that period of time. One of the most memorable things, I'm sure I'll talk about this again at some point, was when he got back from the war. He spent 3.5 years in the South Pacific. He talked about they didn't see a deer, a rabbit, a squirrel, a raccoon. They didn't see any wildlife until the early 50s. So it took 7 years because they just hunted everything out. And that was with a population of 100 million. So with that mindset, I thought, oh God, this is it. And I'm not going to lie. I panicked and just went headlong into survivalism at the time. And for dudes, that's super easy, right? You go buy a bunch of guns, get some MREs. And then I'm like, well, I got knocked that out. What do I do next? And I found this dude named Jack Spirko I was early enough that he was still recording episodes in his car. And I started listening to him, and it gave me a touchstone on, okay, I'm not alone in this. And I had a third of an acre in Payette, Idaho. Beautiful little piece of real estate. Could see mountains in 3 directions. And I started a little garden, and then I started planting fruit trees, and then it was berries and gooseberries and currants and rhubarb. And then I built raised beds and a little greenhouse I found off of North Carolina's Extension Service that was very, very practical, very cheap. And then I realized I had been living. There's that saying of you buy things to impress people you don't like. And I realized I'd been wearing all these suits and trying to project an image that wasn't who I was. I'm a son of the South. We're back here in the South. I drugged my Western bride, who's giggling again, back to humid, bugs, hot as Hades for 3 months out of the year. But I realized I wanted to get married and have a family. So now I passed up the rich ones because that's just too easy. So I'm like, what would be the greatest thing in the world to marry? And it was a school teacher with 2 soulless ginger children's, and a little pug dog named Benji. And I took that responsibility on. And it took probably just the last year where you've really gotten super involved in the homestead. in the homesteading.
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah. So, my take on my wife is when we got married, she was not aware of politics and she was raising 2 kids on her own. She was very centrist and she was very friendly. And then I watched her over the last couple of years here because we've been homesteading the entire time. Since she met me. We'll tell a story about how she offed a raccoon in the middle of the night with a pellet gun later. And I've never lived that down. Hunting, it's easy. But, ever since we've been moving towards this point, I told her when we got married that I wanted a homestead and I wanted some land again. And, I've been the luckiest man in the world because every decision that, we've made, she supported me, and some crazy, crazy stuff that she's just been like, well, okay, let's do it. But the whole point of this podcast is we want to tell you the good, the bad,
and the ugly.
Yeah. But, so that's how we got together. And then what are your thoughts from there? What did you see me doing because I had chickens and ducks in the backyard and all these plants growing?
He just started with 3 chickens and 2 ducks, and then we moved to Texas, where it all kind of exploded.
Well, and so when we got married, we spent 4 of our first 5 years apart. And, part of this podcast is going to be how do you have both partners, carrying the yoke. And I've been very, very lucky that Andrea was understanding and she saw or hoped maybe that I knew what I was doing and let us, try and I've failed a ton. Man, my goodness, we've killed how many geese now? It's got to be approaching. I'm in double digits on the geese.
No,
failure.
I think it's only like 6.
Feels like 100. But there have been things that, have worked really, really well for us, have been profitable. There have been things that, loading pigs, not profitable.
Or fun.
No, that's a whole other episode. It's going to be herding livestock with your significant other and other ways to get divorced.
End your marriage.
Yeah, end your marriage. That's exactly what the title of it is. But, so anyways, we found ourselves in Texas. I was there for 2 years before Andrea got down. And I started with swales and orchards immediately after I got to Texas. And so by the time Andrea got there, the trees were a little productive. I had some chickens going. I didn't realize because I'd been in the north long enough that, my eggs were disappearing and I thought a neighbor was sneaking over in the middle of the night to snatch my eggs.
But no, it was a giant 6-foot rat snake.
Andrea's first day in Texas, I go in the barn and I murder this rat snake. It had, 4 or 5 eggs in it. It was the biggest snake she'd ever seen by a large margin. There are a whole lot of snakes in Idaho, and there are only garter snakes and rattlesnakes.
And definitely not ones that are 6 feet long.
Just chilling all the time. But from there, once she got here, I think I got semi-serious about it. It took me 3 years to ever get any production from our garden in Texas. In Idaho, I thought I knew how to garden, and I realized that I was just a dummy. And the soil there, the climate, unlimited irrigation water it was just the easiest place in the world to grow a garden. We didn't have that many predators. Andrea killed the only raccoon probably within 10 square miles, with a pellet gun in the middle of the night, no glasses. Again, haven't heard the end of it. But we just started expanding. And then I was lucky enough where I work, I have a market built in. So we started selling things. And originally I just wanted some, because we only had 10 acres and it was super, super overgrazed. The gentleman we bought the home from had 26 horses in there in a 10-acre parcel. It was basically a parking lot. It was so hard. Broomweed, which is a noxious weed here in Texas. We're right across the Red River, so I still think I'm in Texas. I work down there. But broomweed is wild. It taken over the entire pasture. So I did a bunch of research and I wasn't sure what was best for us. So I figured let's get a couple of each. So I went and got two belty Galloway. One was 4 months old, the other was 6 months old. Both had just been weaned. And then a Dexter cow with a heifer calf. And I was in both of those all four of them, $2,700, which I didn't realize at the time. I stole every one of those animals compared to what other folks were charging. But threw them out there, let them stay out there for a year, and immediately noticed, because the Belties are basically goats. They eat a ton of browse. They will make a living on a really hard scrabble piece of land. And then, was it probably year 3 when I started, because we'd grown the herd, and I started rotational grazing. And it was amazing what that did for our pasture. And I never ran the chickens directly behind them. We just let the chickens free range. So they'd go, I don't know, 150 yards maybe total around the barn. But it was just amazing what they did. So the extension agent, when I had him come out, his advice, he was an awesome guy. I got to be really good friends with him. One of the things that we'll talk about later is how to, use your extension agency, take advantage of their knowledge, and understand that, they're there for conventional farming. And some of the guys and I think it's probably more than half now, are very, very open to regenerative agriculture. Either they've seen it or they've read about it. My guy he told me a year before he would have told me I was nuts, because he told me to come out, to round up the entire pasture, till it over, 2,4-D it in the spring with a pre-emergent, and then sprig it with coastal Bermuda. And I'm like, how much is that going to cost? He's like, probably $30,000. I was like, oh God, I can't do that. So, what we did was rotational grazing. And then as soon as the broomweed got a little bit taller than the grass, I would just go out there. That was probably just twice a year towards the end, and knock it back down. And it took 2 years of that. And by the third year of the rotational grazing, we had knee-high, just beautiful pasture. Now, we had good wet years. We had some things going for us, but it was, if you're thinking about doing it, if you have enough space to do it, do it. And it's an art. It's not a science for sure on that side, but, you'll figure it out, and you'll get to a read on how much your cows are eating and when it's time to move them. And your cows will figure out faster than you will, because 3 or 4 moves and they will be waiting once you come out there. So we'll talk about that later on. And then from that, the last 2 years, we've really gotten to pigs. Mm-hmm. So we did coonies, total disaster. We did American guinea hogs. I have nothing but great things to say about them other than their size. And then we did a whole bunch of conventional hogs. So we'll talk a lot about pigs, about what you're looking for, feed, waterers, spacing, shade, housing, all those things that, again, we'll try and talk about all of our mistakes. And Andrea is looking at me, all my mistakes. Andrea's just here to judge and provide comedic relief. So we've done a bunch of chickens. We've done a bunch of meat birds. We have thoughts on that. We're going in a different direction, so we'll have you along for that journey. But I incubate all of our own eggs now. One of the things that I'll encourage you to do is your barnyard mix chicken for where you're at is the greatest thing you can do. And whether that's with the Bressies that we're going to go to, or Buff Orpingtons, or Rhode Island Reds, it doesn't matter. Whatever works in your area, the chickens that survive a couple, 3 years, man, those are the chickens that you want to incubate and keep around, because those genetics, that heritability of predator avoidance, of keeping their head in the swivel, all that stuff matters. And it's definitely something that I can't encourage you enough. Just breed the survivors.
Yes, because we learned that lesson in the when it did the great Texas storm of 2021, and
The winter storm that shut down the state was a big deal.
We had 10 chickens, and we didn't do anything extra for them.
They were left
every single
out in the
one
elements.
of them lived.
Except for one. We had one that said, it's too much. But they were just in a Siskovich-style tractor. We were renting a house at the time. I was renovating our home up here in Oklahoma. So those guys didn't have anything stopping airflow. They had a tarp over the top. And 9 out of the 10 hens survived that. And if they can survive that, which is the worst thing that's in living memory anyone had seen, we're super, super happy about those genetics. And that's one of the things I can't encourage you enough. Go out, find roosters from neighbors, bring in good genetics. The F1 hybrid, we'll talk about that with cattle. Understanding what those genetics bring to your flock. But on roosters, we can talk about this right now. Any rooster that ever shows any aggression to a human,
get rid of it.
He's in the pot that night, or he is pig food being turned into bacon. So one of the things that we really, really happy about, by the time we left Texas, all of our roosters completely docile with us. And with strangers, it didn't matter. They had no problems with being around humans at all. And, you're talking about every 6 months you've got roosters coming of age. So I would just keep the biggest, most docile, and most protective of their flock. I had one rooster that fought off 2 juvenile coyotes, lost most of the feathers. I've got an Instagram post about it. Lost most of the feathers on his body. Still survived another week before he finally succumbed to his injuries. But that's what we wanted. That dude was out there just giving holy heck to the coyotes. So we're looking for those things. And what else do we want to talk about? Okay, so from there, chickens, pigs, we got up here to Oklahoma. We had a greenhouse. We're going to talk a lot about, this is my third greenhouse I've had and I've grown in. So we're going to talk about growing in the north, growing in central Texas. We were just north of Waco, about 45 minutes. And then here in Oklahoma, which has its challenges of its own. I like tornadoes. You like tornadoes?
No.
Andrea loves
I'm really fond of tornadoes.
Lightning, thunder, tornadoes. Idaho, the worst weather you get is like a half inch of rain. Everyone's complaining about it. They sit inside and eat Doritos.
And it usually comes in a sprinkle or not a drastic downpour.
Yeah. So there's not, and then the snow, either you just drive through it, right? You get to where you're going or you don't. But, Idaho, where we were at, was the banana belt. So Pat was sort of the top of that where it started to actually stick a little bit. But Boise, Nampa, Caldwell, most of the time when you're there, the snow doesn't stay on the ground for more than 3 days, and it melts, and it's beautiful up in the hills. So it's a really lovely place to live. No one could afford to stay there, making, the money that we make. So that, and I want to come back to the South. And Andrew, do you miss winters?
No.
At all?
No.
Even a little bit?
The last winter that we had in Weiser before we moved out here, we had 3 feet of snow. We lived in town. Russ was in Rhode Island. And I had to shovel the corner sidewalk that seemed forever. And it just kept snowing and snowing and snowing.
Yeah, that year was wild because they had all kinds of businesses, roofs collapsing. And again, I'd lived there for, 15, 16 years off and on. And I'd never seen anything like that. And the old timers had never seen anything like that roofs of businesses that have been there, like Ripley's and Weiser, and all kinds of different things for 70, 80 years. So we get to Texas. What was that thing that happened? What was it called? The Rona?
Oh,
yeah. So the Rona happens. There's something else going on at that time. So January 1st of 2020, my wife walks in the room, throws this, some kind of stick on my chest. Look what you've done to me! We're pregnant. What were you, 43 at the time?
44.
You were 44 when you had him. You're 43 when you threw that stick at me.
Yes.
Yeah. The geriatric pregnancy. You want to talk about baby brain and old age. It's a horrible combination. So anyways, 2020, this baby is coming. I'm just turned 44. It was the single greatest thing that anyone ever told me. And hopefully you'll get in the course of these podcast episodes how madly in love I am with my wife and just how lucky I am that she
puts up with his antics.
Yeah. Well, low standards and bad eyesight are all I was really ever looking for in a woman, and I found it. But, so anyways, we're pregnant, 2020, and, 3 weeks later, I start telling Andrea, there's some stuff going on in China that's kind of weird. And I started
bringing home bags
of food. Yeah. So we had talked about in December that 2020, my goal was to get a year's worth of food on hand. And, we've lived amongst the Mormons for long enough that, we're pretty comfortable with the food storage thing. And, I go out there and I started buying it and I start seeing this stuff happen. And the 1st of February, it really kicked off and I started seeing stuff here in the States. And I'm like, okay, I was going to do this over the next 12 months. How about we just do it over the next 3 pay periods? Because I had the extra money set aside. And Andrea's like, with most things, I tell her what I'm seeing. She's like, okay, crazy guy. So I honestly, the next 3 paydays, brought home in this little Ford.
Prius.
No, it was a Ford Focus.
Oh,
I was driving the Focus then. Let's not have people judge me about the Prius this early. We're going to edit that out, but we're not. So anyways, I bring this car just full. I'm at Winco. I'm ordering all this stuff online that you can't order online anymore. I was ordering wheat berries, 250 pounds at a time, and then lentils, beans, sugar, salt, all these different things. And there was this really sweet African-American lady that was the bulk foods manager. And the first time she met me, I had 2 huge carts full. And she's like, "Child, why do you need all this food?" I'm like, "Have you heard of, it was at the time they were calling it the novel coronavirus or, there's whatever, the Wuhan novel coronavirus. Mm-hmm. Have you heard of this?" She's like, "No, should I?" I'm like, "Yeah, you might want to look into it." And the Winco I went to was super, super in the hood. So, there's not a big, worries about getting robbed, but I knew no one's going to rip me off of wheat berries. So anyways, we did that for, the 1st, the 15th, and the 1st of, no, it was the 15th of February, mm-hmm. the 1st of March, and the 15th of March. And I remember, my boss at the time tells us we're going to stop traveling. We're going to stop, flying. And I raised my hand. I'm like, so why are we still here if that's the case? Because I was super, super paranoid. I have this, my child, that Andrea's carrying. And I'm watching this wild, in hindsight, propaganda videos out of China. And he laughed at me, right? And in front of, all my coworkers. And we go out and the NCAA canceled that day the basketball tournament. Andrea and I, she was a player, I was a coach. I never coached her. It's not how we met. That would be creepy. But I still remember how that affected him because I think that was the first thing where he finally realized maybe this is going to be a thing. And then
we had planned a
trip yeah.
to go to Tennessee, to Nashville. And then he got orders that he could not leave the state. And then we ended up having to cancel the trip. Thankfully, we got our money back.
See, she's focused on the money, not us not dying of, the flu. But, anyways, so they sent us home. And then for I was home for 3 months mm-hmm. through June. And we'd finished the, greenhouse the year before. We put the plastic on the year before, and I'd started growing 1st of March. I think we planted because I got a late start planting. I could have planted that year the 1st of January because we'd never had another frost. So we got a ton of production out of that greenhouse. I was out there, really got to get my hands into that and spend all my time, because all my Zoom meetings and conference calls I was on, I had my headphones in and I was out there, working in that. And then Samuel's born. And, before Samuel was born, I said, after the Trump bucks came through, the stimulus, I'm like, inflation's going to hit. We're going to have a really short window. The house had increased in value to, I had a number. It was 50% over what we paid for it. And I told Andrea a year before, if it hits that, we have to think about selling, because everything's through the lens of 2008. So anyways, we hit that number. We're very, very fortunate. We have a really good friend that lives 0.4 of a mile from where we're at in Oklahoma. And this place that we're in now went on the market for $280,000 originally. And then, nothing was happening. This place was super, super dead. They dropped it down to 220, 230.
Yeah, I want to say it was 220.
Okay. And then we offered them 200. They accepted the offer. We sold out, and we did all this with a newborn and in a rental house in the middle of COVID. And then we had the great freeze of 2020. Mm-hmm. So
no, the great freeze was in
2021, mm-hmm. Right? So anyways, we buy this place. We've got half the farm in storage, half sitting at my buddy Kyle's place. Oh, and then I'm up here every weekend for a year when I didn't have drill, remodeling this house. Every once in a while I'd bring a couple of kids up to help me. And then we moved down here Memorial Day of 2021. Mm-hmm. Andrew taught locally for a year. And then I think COVID really changed her view, or it's not even that. I think COVID broke poor kids. You know, rich kids and middle class kids where the parents were involved made it through COVID okay. I'm not saying they didn't have issues, but poor kids and middle class kids whose parents weren't involved are just broken. They had 2 years where they could, see anything they want on the internet. 2 years without any kind of guidance, direction. And especially for the younger kids that are going through that, I'd say kindergarten through 7th grade?
Yeah.
Those kids had no idea what normal was, and this just became their normal. So and I'm not going to speak for Andrew, what made you choose to homeschool this year?
Teaching wasn't fun anymore. I just spent a lot of time, quote unquote, policing the kids' behavior. And I felt like I wasn't successful anymore. And I always told myself that when teaching wasn't fun anymore, that I was out.
So anyways, we, this year, Andrea is homeschooling our middle daughter, and then, got a couple of neighbor kids. They're coming over every day. And then Samuel's home. And this year, what's it been? How long do you think you've really been engaged here since?
Well, I got the goats.
We're going to talk a lot about goats. A lot about goats, which I had as a kid growing up, so I'm super familiar. And Andrea is the goat lady. The goats are living their absolute best life. What are their names?
In the goat palace.
They have a goat palace. What are their names?
Betty A, Lady G, and Pearl.
So these 3 goats get fresh cuttings of tree limbs each day delivered to them, like a salad bar. But yeah, so she got the goats, and then all of a sudden she started, cause she always said that Spirko was a jerk. She didn't like his episodes, and she started listening a lot. And I think with a different kind of ear, but, she's basically taking over on the day-to-day basis a lot of what we do. We've increased our herd, on the cow side. We're up to 8 cows and 4 heifers. So we're at 12 cows. We're trying to get to 20. And we're just going to take you on the journey and teach you again. Not even teach you, show you all of our mistakes and what we would have done differently or what we did improperly. So as we close up here, Andrea, do you have anything else to add?
No.
It's like having the absolute worst color man in the business. You're doing play-by-play. Oh, off to you, Jim. That was a strike. and just dead air. It's fantastic. But we'll talk to you more. We'll get better at